Before I left witchcraft, there was one thing we understood very clearly: nighttime is not neutral. Most believers think the day is where spiritual battles happen, during work, during conflict, during visible struggle. But inside the occult, we were taught that the most strategic battles happen when a person is asleep. Because sleep is surrender, and surrender without protection is vulnerability. I was trained as a witch, not casually, not culturally, intentionally. We studied patterns: who prospered, who declined, who seemed spiritually guarded, and who was wide open. And one of the simplest ways we determined someone's vulnerability was this: what do they say before they sleep? You may think your nighttime routine is small: brushing your teeth, scrolling your phone, turning off the lights, whispering a quick prayer. But in the spirit realm, the last words you speak before sleep act like a seal over the next 8 hours. We knew that. That's why we were trained to work between midnight and 3 a.m., when most people are spiritually unguarded and mentally offline. The people who were hardest to influence were not the loudest Christians. They were not the most emotional. They were the most consistent. They sealed their nights with intention. They declared identity. They closed doors before they closed their eyes. And I need you to hear me carefully: transformation doesn't begin in the morning. It begins the night before. After I left witchcraft and surrendered my life to Christ, I realized something that shocked me. The very tactic we used to monitor and influence people could be reversed. The same principle that made someone vulnerable could make them untouchable. The same nighttime window we exploited could become a place of renewal, protection, and acceleration. What you say before sleep matters more than you've been told. Not because words are magic, but because agreement is powerful. In the next chapter, I'm going to explain why nighttime declarations shift atmosphere, how the subconscious plays a role in spiritual alignment, and why many believers wake up drained simply because they never sealed their night properly. Stay with me. This could change more than your sleep. When I was practicing witchcraft, we were taught something that most churches rarely explain: nighttime amplifies agreement. Not because darkness is stronger than light, but because the human mind is quieter. And when the mind is quiet, what you've declared settles deeper. During the day, your thoughts are scattered. You're multitasking. You're reacting. You're processing noise. But at night, especially in the final moments before sleep, your conscious defense is lower. Your subconscious becomes receptive. And in that window, whatever truth or lie you agree with settles like a seed. This is why some of you wake up anxious without knowing why. Why some mornings feel heavy before anything even happens. It's not always attack. Sometimes it's unsealed agreement. In the occult, we didn't just perform rituals, we monitored cycles. If a person consistently fell asleep stressed angry, fearful, or scrolling through negativity, their atmosphere weakened gradually, not dramatically, gradually. Fatigue increased, clarity decreased, discipline slipped. Over time, their life reflected the pattern of their nights. But here's what we feared: believers who intentionally sealed their sleep. Because when someone declared peace, identity, and authority before rest, it created resistance. It disrupted interference. It strengthened mental clarity the next day. And consistency built momentum. You must understand something important. Night is not just for physical rest, it's for spiritual reset. The body repairs, the brain reorganizes memory, and spiritually, your mind processes what it has agreed with. If you end your night rehearsing problems, your spirit rehearses pressure. If you end your night declaring truth, your spirit aligns with stability. This is not superstition, it's alignment. The enemy doesn't need dramatic access if you consistently fall asleep in worry. Anxiety becomes self-sustaining. Fear becomes a cycle. And cycles don't require demons, they require agreement. That's why what you say every night matters. Not because repetition is magic, but because consistency trains your internal atmosphere, and atmosphere shapes outcomes. In the next chapter, I'm going to reveal the exact kind of declaration we avoided targeting, and why simple, grounded words spoken calmly before sleep can begin shifting patterns within days. Stay focused. This is where transformation becomes practical. I want to be very clear in this chapter. What I'm about to share is not a chant. It's not a formula. It's not mystical wording. Inside witchcraft, we relied on formulas. In Christ, authority is rooted in identity, not repetition. But there was a pattern we noticed, and it unsettled us every time. Believers who ended their day with calm, specific declarations rooted in Scripture became spiritually difficult to access. Not dramatic believers, not loud believers, consistent believers. Here's why. When someone said slowly and intentionally before sleep, "Father, I belong to you. My mind is covered. My home is covered. I reject every agreement with fear. I receive your peace." Something shifted, not emotionally, structurally. Because that kind of declaration does three things. First, it reaffirms identity, and identity cancels illegal access. When you consciously remind yourself who you belong to, you remove confusion. Confusion is a doorway. Clarity is a wall. Second, it withdraws agreement. Remember, this darkness does not require drama. It requires consent. If you go to sleep anxious, rehearsing lack, replaying arguments, or anticipating disaster, you are unintentionally consenting to that atmosphere. But when you say, "I reject agreement with fear," you are actively revoking consent. Third, it invites peace intentionally. Peace is not passive, it's positioned. When peace fills a space, interference struggles to remain. In the occult, we avoided individuals who had disciplined nighttime declarations. because their sleep became restorative instead of vulnerable. Their dreams were clearer. Their mornings were sharper. Their emotional resilience increased. Over time, their lives reflected stability. Now listen carefully. You do not need to say these words perfectly. You need to say them consistently, calmly, without striving, without superstition, just alignment. Here is a simple structure you can use every night. Acknowledge who God is. Affirm who you are in Him. Reject fear and false agreements. Invite peace and protection over your sleep. It can be 30 seconds. It can be 1 minute. But mean it. Slow down. Disconnect from your phone. Turn off the noise. Seal the night intentionally. Transformation does not usually explode into your life overnight. It builds quietly, sleep by sleep, decision by decision, agreement by agreement. In the next chapter, I'm going to explain why some people experience resistance the moment they start doing this, and how to respond without falling back into old patterns. Because when you close a door consistently, something that benefited from that door will try to knock one last time. Don't stop at the first resistance. That's often proof it's working. This is the part most people get wrong. They start sealing their nights. They begin speaking peace. They intentionally reject fear before sleep. And for a few days, everything feels calm. Then suddenly, resistance shows up. Strange dreams, restlessness, random anxiety right as they're about to fall asleep. And they assume it's not working. But inside witchcraft, we were trained to recognize something very specific when access points begin closing. Interference attempts one final surge. Not because it's strong, but because it's losing ground. Think about it like this. If a door has been open for years, and you suddenly begin closing it every night, anything accustomed to walking through that door will notice. And for a short time, it may push against it, not to overpower you, but to see if you'll reopen it voluntarily through frustration or fear. This is where consistency becomes power. If you misinterpret resistance as failure, you will stop the very habit that was building protection. But if you recognize resistance as confirmation, you remain steady, calm, unmoved. When I left witchcraft, I experienced this personally. The first week, I began declaring peace before sleep. My dreams intensified. Not dark, just loud. My mind felt busy at night. But instead of panicking, I remained consistent. Within days, everything leveled out. My sleep deepened. My morning sharpened. And the internal pressure that used to follow me quietly disappeared. Resistance often surfaces in three ways. First, distraction. You'll suddenly feel the urge to scroll longer, to skip your declaration, to fall asleep to noise instead of silence. Second, doubt. Thoughts like, this is silly, words don't matter. Third, impatience. You expect instant transformation. When it doesn't happen dramatically, you assume nothing changed. But transformation built through consistency, is stronger than transformation built through hype. If anxiety rises at night, don't rebuke it angrily. Don't dramatize it. Simply restate your declaration calmly, peacefully. Authority without emotion is deeply stabilizing. Remember, you're not fighting, you're aligning. Night after night, you are retraining your internal atmosphere. And atmospheres don't shift through force, they shift through repetition and clarity. In the final chapter, I'm going to show you how this simple nightly practice begins transforming not just your sleep, but your finances, your relationships, your mental clarity, and your spiritual sensitivity over time. Because when nights are sealed, days begin to change. Here is what most people don't realize. The goal of sealing your night is not just better sleep, it's alignment. And alignment compounds. When I was deep in witchcraft, we didn't just look for dramatic events in someone's life, we looked for patterns. Patterns told us everything. If someone's nights were restless, their days were reactive. If their sleep was anxious, their decisions were rushed. If they woke up drained, their discipline weakened. And when discipline weakens, life slowly unravels, not all at once, but consistently. That's why this matters more than it seems. When you begin saying intentional, faith filled declarations before sleep every single night, something subtle but powerful happens. Your mind rests instead of rehearsing problems. Your body relaxes instead of bracing for tomorrow. Your spirit resets instead of carrying unresolved tension forward. And that reset builds momentum. Within days, you may notice clearer thinking in the morning. Within weeks, you may notice less emotional volatility. Over time, you'll realize you're responding to life instead of reacting to it. That shift alone changes finances, relationships, and opportunities, because clarity produces better decisions, and better decisions produce better outcomes. Inside the occult, we understood something believers often ignore: exhaustion is vulnerability. A tired mind is easier to influence. A drained person is more likely to agree with fear, insecurity, and compromise. But a well-rested believer who goes to sleep in peace and wakes up grounded is difficult to destabilize. And this is where transformation becomes visible. When your nights are sealed consistently, anxiety loses its grip. Fear stops recycling. Creativity increases. Discernment sharpens. You become less reactive to pressure. You stop overthinking conversations. You stop anticipating disaster. And because you're no longer internally chaotic, external chaos loses power over you. Let me say something important before we close. The words you say every night are not magical. They are directional. They point your heart toward truth. They withdraw agreement from fear. They remind your mind who you belong to. And when that reminder becomes consistent, your life begins to reflect it. So tonight, before you close your eyes, slow down, turn off the noise, speak calmly. Father, I belong to you. I reject fear. I receive your peace. My mind, my home, and my future are in your hands. That's it. No drama, no striving, just alignment. And then watch what happens, not in one explosive moment, but in steady, undeniable change. Because when you seal your night with truth, you don't just sleep differently, you start living differently.